Good evening, everyone. I'm Shay Moraga, the founder of Shay's Warriors Life After Cancer. And tonight we have a very, very special panel. One of the most important and often overlooked pieces of cancer survivorship is our mental and our emotional recovery and healing. According to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of mental well-being and enables people to cope with stresses of life. They realize their abilities, learn well, and work well, and contribute to their community. It is an instrumental value and is an important part of our well-being. Mental health is a huge topic that we know cannot sufficiently be addressed within the next 60 days. We will do our best to at least get to the tip of the iceberg and maybe dip our toes into the water to get a little bit deeper. Our panel of experts will be providing tools to help you move forward from being mentally, emotionally, and physically unstuck by addressing how to recognize the need for help, how to ask for help, and options of other supports. Today, our panel, we are joined by guest Karen Corbett, a marriage family licensed therapist. Sorry about that. And Allison Marisax, Director of Community Outreach and Cancer Support Services in Oncology Social Work, and among others. Jeannie, our nurse practitioner, Dr. Amy Harrington, also on our panel, and two more advocates and survivors, Elizabeth and Dr. Denise. Thank you for joining us all tonight.
Welcome.
And not save the best for last, of course. From the live. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
All right.
So we have quite a bit about mental health going. And in survivorship, there are mental and physical scars that contribute grief, anger, depression, anxiety. One of the things that came up that we were asked by a panel for our panel here tonight is, how do you personally get unstuck and navigate productively through these emotions to start?
Do you just want somebody to speak?
Yes, anyone who wants to start out. This is very casual.
Well, I think as someone who's a survivor and a therapist, I think the first thing is to be able to know that whatever emotions you're having are happening. Like to stop, pause, and be aware. Because if you're not aware, then you start having psychosomatic issues. It may be hard to be productive. And so I think first step is just awareness that, when you get through a disease, what a relief, but you don't realize there's a whole other big phase coming, and that survivorship is 90% mental health, and not realizing where your trauma lies, how it may affect your productivity. And so I think awareness first, understanding that it is natural for all the feelings or trauma that anything that might come up. Just be aware of it first so that you can actually process it and think about it.
I think sometimes I will hear in groups that I do, I did fine. I was doing fine. It's all done. Why am I so upset now after the fact? And I think one of the things, and this is sometimes tends to be more women in my experience, but not always. It's just that we put our heads down and put one foot in front of the other. Like Karen, I'm a cancer survivor, and it was just, okay, this is what I have to do. Now I have my treatment plan. Okay. And I move through it. I get all done. And then it's kind of safe to go, what just happened?
Yes.
That awareness, plugs right into that.
Well, and the what just happened is huge because you're living in a crisis mode. So from the time you get a diagnosis, your normal mode of living is kind of asleep, and you're in crisis mode, and you live in crisis mode until you're through your cancer or disease, whatever you have. And then exactly that, you don't realize all the trauma you've had, and also that you've been holding on to it, knowing if I feel this now, it will be too much. So that a lot of times those emotions you don't even know, you've been like trying to tuck away for safety, almost to feel safe. They come flooding out afterwards because you have to process them. So if they've been on pause, afterwards is when you start working through those things. So I can see how that would surprise people to not realize that that's when a lot of intensity hits.
Yeah, and I for me, I think I'm not a survivor, but what I've seen with patients that have experienced cancer, my survivor friend, community, colleagues, is that I think it's the severity and duration of any stressor. And obviously being diagnosed with the cancer and undergoing treatment, experiencing it, it's almost like what I think they have is kind of a form of PTSD, right? So within PTSD, though, there's also a level of amnesia almost that occurs with certain aspects of the trauma. And it's like you need a little time to process that. It's almost like our brains are constantly picking up stuff and just filing it to later go back and revisit, right? So some of that with cancer, I think, would definitely apply. Things that maybe in the moment you were living it, and then all of a sudden everything stopped, and everyone's expecting you to be very relieved and very happy, and you probably are. But then it's also just the idea that what I've heard from patients is that they're kind of numb initially. There's a numbing in their responsiveness, and then they might start to slowly remember things that they experienced. And that could take it could be immediate, it could take months, it could take a month. It's different for everyone with PTSD, right? So it's surprising to so many that I wasn't feeling this. Well, you were so focused on healing and getting through this, all of your energy was put towards that in that basket because that's what you could handle. And now you have time to go through those drawers in your head and revisit and experience some of those aspects that maybe you weren't really ready to deal with before. And now you're living as a survivor, and you've been functioning in a level of abnormality for so long. It's I would think that it would be very, very challenging at times to navigate through that.
Well, I think the navigation too, as a survivor,
Yeah.
and if I go back about 7 years, you're definitely on point for me personally, and I think everybody is way different. I was very tunnel vision and focused on let's get to the next chemo, let's get to the next chemo, let's get to the next radiation, let's get to the next surgery, and then I'm done. And I thought there would be this beautiful epiphany, like, woo, I'm done. Life goes, let's celebrate. All my friends wanted to celebrate with me.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't until 3 months after being done with everything that for me, it finally hit me. And it hit me like a brick wall. And it was at that point, I was like, where's my people?
Yeah.
Am I going crazy? Like, I literally thought I was going crazy. What's going on? How do I navigate this by myself? And I didn't want to go to a therapist. No offense to anyone who's in therapy. But I needed to talk to somebody who had been through it.
Yeah.
And so I found a support group, which was, during the time that maybe I should have been in all along, but I was scared. And I was also in that tunnel vision of like, I just need to focus on the end goal as if I was running a marathon and get to the finish line. And the emotions all came, which for me, it was similar to grief that I had experienced before.
Well, it is grief.
Feel that way?
It's a great question. I mean, a great word to use, because we are grieving. We're grieving on so many different levels, from the loss of feeling healthy, the loss of control. We may lose body parts. For those of us, depending what our cancer is, we may look differently. Our spouses, our loved ones, our significant others may respond to us differently. There's so much loss that's associated, and loss often, most often, grief and loss go hand in hand. So I think that's a good word to use to describe.
And I think it's almost, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, please.
I think although I'm not a cancer survivor, I am a survivor of a disease that was determined to be terminal. And thanks to Dr. Fung, I am here. But I think that survivorship is something that is not talked about. And it's almost like you've not been asleep, you've just been in that focus tunnel. And afterwards, now your life is here. And there's all different kinds of fallout, including not only your trauma, but the trauma of the people who love you and how they handle their trauma. I uniquely found that the people who were closest to me, who had to go through some of the most insane possible things, now they don't want to talk about it. So now that I'm healthy enough to process it, I would find that if I talked about it with those people who had been through it with me, it's like, let's not talk about it. Like, let's forget about it. It's over. We're just not going to think about it. Yeah. And that doesn't work. That's when I needed to process. But that's when others were too uncomfortable.
I think maybe for what I would think is maybe for family, it's almost like they're avoiding re-experiencing a traumatic event.
Yes.
People, maybe those that are not survivors are not quite sure how to talk about things. So I think this is a really important conversation that we're having during today's discussion and session, because we are trying to teach our survivorship community how to talk about feelings and understand where their loved one is coming from, or their friend or family, and try to help. But it almost sounds like in some aspect, what I was hearing from you, Shay, is like, and you too, Karen, is like there's almost like a survivor's guilt in some way for and after just kind of feeling some depression and just kind of mixed emotions about where this has been what I am for during my treatment, and now it's like, that's just, where are my people, like you said, like all the support that I had, all the meal trains and all this stuff I've kind of like done, and I still need someone to help me like learn to be almost like a civilian again.
That's a great way to put it. Back in life again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and there is that strong expectation that once you're done with treatment, that it's just kind of like, oh, you're good now. And like Shay said, where are my people? Everybody was there for us during, or hopefully we had community and support during treatment. I know I was very lucky to have my family and my friends constantly around me. And then afterwards, like maybe a couple weeks after, a month after, my dad was like, so like, why don't you have a job again? Like, why aren't you back in school? And that's really when, life, trying to reintegrate back into life and being a survivor, especially for myself at a young age, was kind of like, oh, like you're good now. It was, nothing's different. And it's like, everything's different. My whole perspective of life, about health, about how I want to treat myself, and other people don't necessarily share those same values. And that's why having community in survivorship is so important.
I think one of the things that I'm hearing and we're talking about like tools to unlock that area is that many of us that are practitioners, we use the term validate. We listen to somebody, whether we agree with it or not, we validate their feelings. And so for the cancer survivors, they need to give themselves a break and validate that what they're feeling is okay. And, and it's also okay to, talk to your family. And I get it. Your dad, Anissa, like he thinks that, okay, you survived and you want to do this. And you're like, but I'm not there yet. But they're not a healthcare provider. They don't know, like, oh, they didn't hear what we hear. And we need to say, hey, so what's going on? And, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm still scared. And I think that's one of the tools we want to share with the survivors. Validate how you feel. It's okay. There's no wrong in how you feel. Whether you're the person that's like, I'm good to go, don't care about anything else. I can't jump back into because there are going to be those people, and that's okay too. But give yourself a break and validate your own feelings and how you feel, and then find your tribe.
Mm-hmm. Those are really good points, Jeannie. And I think that, there might be some people that do validate that, giving ourselves grace and whatnot. So what would you say to an individual who does say, I'm still struggling with fatigue. I'm still struggling with PTSD or the possibility of reoccurrence. I am scared. What do you say then, or how do you explain this? And because when your hair grows back and your eyelashes and you look healthy again, how do you tell someone, I'm tired as you know what, and I can't go, and I'm not able to do that? Because our appearances as survivors to other individuals make a huge difference. If I'm bald, you know that I am sick. But if I now look like this, there are many times, even today, that I am as tired as can be, and I don't know. I can't explain it. I never used to be this tired. But that sets in. So how do you explain that to family and friends when they look at you and they think you're okay? What's the big deal? Anyone want to take a crack at that?
Well, I don't mind taking a crack at that because I still deal with that, and it can, and fatigue is something that I very much still deal with, and, various other things, but I'm alive and I'm back in life again. Right. And so people see you look amazing, like it's over. And even the word survivorship, I have to be honest, I never heard that before. And I thought, I didn't think of it as a phase, survivorship. I didn't think about what it would mean to me, or certainly what it would mean to others who think that you're through it, so there shouldn't be anything else. And I think that the first thing is to try to be able to explain, that I appreciate your thoughts. Tell you the truth, I'm actually still struggling a little bit. And to be able to explain that. And the people that are closest to you, almost educate them about, you had your phases of illness and now you have your phases of, oh, wait, I'm going to live. Like, I'm going to get to go back to life now. But it's not all roses and balloons. It is a whole new world to navigate. And I think that not only do they not understand it, I have to be honest, even I was surprised by that. And so, and even for them too, to be able to say, let me ask you, I know what I'm going through, but do you feel like you're completely through your own trauma of what I have been through? Because I think that they don't even know that they have their own trauma.
That makes such great sense, because I think that the survivor doesn't want to rain on the parade of the person who's been cheering for you, right? Yeah. But when you look back at them and say, hey, I know you went through this with me too. And I think that to decrease their sense of like, whoa, I didn't even think about that, give them something that they can do for you to help you with your fatigue. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be anything like, hey, you know, I've made it through this, and if you just want to keep praying for me, if that's their thing, or, you know, I have these 2 kids, and, you know, sometimes I just don't have the energy to pick them up from school. Anyway, you can do that for me once a week. Like, giving somebody something they can tangibly do for you validates how they're feeling, and it is so empowering. I know it's hard for us to ask, but we all say, you know, let me know if there's anything I can do. We mean it. And if you give me a task that I can do for you, oh my gosh, I am there. And I think that will help them to see that you are not done in your journey, and that they still want to support you.
I think that's great points. I think there's a reason that survivors, thrivers, whatever we want to call ourselves, we gravitate towards each other because we understand what each other has gone through. And I think, too, when we talk about our others in our lives who we adore and care about, for me, there needs to be a recognition of how exhausted they are with our having been sick. And when they say, you look great, great, or how come you're not doing this? More often than not, it's purely out of love for us, but also their need to get back to normalcy in their life. So no, we're not supposed to take care of everyone all of the time. That's not the point of that. It's more recognizing that. And you know, my mom used to say to me, not one person can meet all your needs. So
Amen.
if you think you're going to have this romantic, I love you, you're everything in my entire life, good luck with that, Allie. Your next wedding. Um, it's kind of that same thing. It's, you know what? They love us to death. They were there for us. They went through it. It wasn't all a bed of roses. They've had enough. They've had enough. That's okay. It doesn't mean you're not loved. It means, hey, let me get that help and support maybe somewhere else for a while. So something else to think about.
Yeah, for me in survivorship, it's listening to everybody talk. It's hitting me pretty hard. After treatment, I went straight back to work, and I went full steam ahead. No slowing me down. I was done with treatment. I didn't focus on any single emotion that I was feeling. I kind of put like a roadblock in front of me to not feel what I was feeling, but I knew that there was something that was happening. Um, I was having side effects from medications. I was seeing changes from those medications, changes from treatment, and I just didn't want to address it. Um, I was ignoring and pushing and pushing and pushing everything away to the point where I found myself just so empty and so alone and so isolated that I didn't even know where to start. I was so alone, but you are so surrounded by so many people, but yet there's no one there. And it was so hard to even start navigating the day, even just talking to my husband about these issues, what I was feeling. I couldn't do it. I couldn't talk to anybody. And I was just like, what do I do? I feel like I'm about to go crazy. I feel like I'm pushing myself to this point where I can't continue. And I felt so overwhelmed that it came to a point where I'm like, I'm giving up. Like, I felt like there was nothing left for me. Nothing left for me until I found Shay's Warriors, and I was able to validate the emotions, because I sincerely, like Shay said, I didn't feel right. I felt like I was going crazy. Like, these emotions, like, how do you feel angry and sad and grief and like I'm losing a part of myself? I felt so many emotions in one little bubble that I couldn't control it, and I didn't know how to release it. I didn't know how to acknowledge it, and that's hard. And that's hard. And to finally like be able to acknowledge that and hear someone say, I did too. It's, I don't know, it's not a rewarding feeling, but there's something in your soul that kind of just pours out, that you're just like, you have that moment to breathe and say, oh my gosh, I'm not going crazy. There's not,
Validating.
in my
Validating, yeah.
in my imagination. And you go through, and I went through that for a whole year, and now I'm almost 2 years out of treatment, and I'm, I still struggle with certain things. I find myself going in and out. But hearing everybody talking about it, it's kind of like bringing up a lot of those emotions, and I feel like tears coming down my eyes, because it's like, it's still there. It's, those emotions are still there, and it's really hard to think about, because everybody says, you made it, you're okay. But I'm not okay. I there's still a piece of me that hasn't healed, that isn't fixed. Treatment didn't fix everything. There's a little piece in survivorship that still needs healing, and I'm still working through the process. And I don't know how to, I'm still digging, but I don't know how to navigate every single day.
It's like a disequilibrium, and almost, we have a view of what life is normally and how situations should be occurring. And then when something like cancer and treatment comes up, it just challenges all of those constructs that we have of how we should be living life, what should be happening. And when you've been through such a traumatic experience, you start to have you question that, and with the disequilibrium that you're experiencing, and then it's just all those fundamental beliefs are just kind of challenged and invalidated by your trauma, and it's hard to comprehend what you're feeling exactly, why. But there's been such change that you're fundamentally changed. You are changed to your core, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's very, to me, it's very inspiring to hear what you say, to know that you are being vulnerable and letting us know how you're feeling, and you seek connections, and that you're finding that within a survivor thriver community. And you're not alone, as you are realizing, hopefully, that you are surrounded by individuals that are here to support you. And I do like what Jeannie said about being specific about how you can help someone. So those that are listening, or family and stuff, whenever you are offering, I would say, offering help to someone, be very specific also on what you're able to do. I'm really good at doing laundry. I'm horrible at cooking. So,
I will get your phone number. What is that phone number?
And that's something I think that whenever we're trying to support others experiencing either loss or going through a difficult situation, we're not quite sure exactly what to say, because our experience with trauma is telling us we have to normalize, we have to make things, put things back in equilibrium. Everything has to be the way it was. It's almost like a doll fell off, those little, what are they called? The babies look at the little
mobiles.
The mobiles. It's like a little doll fell off the mobile. It still works. Like, you still have a loving relationship with others, and your family still care deeply about you. You care deeply about them. But it's almost like tiptoeing. Something's off. It still works, but something's a little off kilter, right? Something's changed. So it's looking to like stabilize that again. And maybe it won't fully return to that prior level. Maybe it becomes an even better one. I don't know. A better version.
Great ideas, and also for some, I think it's helpful to acknowledge that we use the word trauma, a traumatic experience, which cancer is, for sure. It is a traumatic experience. We need to also recognize, who were we before the cancer? Were there traumatic experiences of our lives before? Is this triggering? We've all heard that word. It's so in. It's a trigger. College lectures. I'm talking about triggers in your own life. What happened before? So for some of us, don't have loving family. We don't have loving friends, or we haven't in the past, and all of a sudden we're back to where we were. They don't understand me. They don't get it. I feel all alone. It's important to recognize we bring our whole life experience into cancer. You know, we don't walk into cancer this empty shell, and now we're going to start having all these feelings. What happened before? How do we cope before? I think it's helpful when we think like that too.
Yeah.
I agree. I am going to throw y'all for a little loop.
Oy. No, I
actually experienced, I know you're right. I experienced a little bit of anger after this cancer. And this doesn't point to any of you at all. But the reason why I experienced anger is someone who's never gone through cancer is now telling me how I should feel, how I should act, and what I should do. And I got to be honest, that pissed me off. There was a couple times, and some of those people were actually my doctors, because you've never experienced the cancer. And I had to check myself a little bit and step back and say, okay, I have to have empathy because this person doesn't understand. And some of them were my friends, but it really is a hard balance. And Allie, I can see you're ready to jump in. And it's because there's a hard bridge sometimes with clinical and someone who's gone through it. And we're all trying to get through the best we can. But I do get very, it brings something up with me when someone hasn't gone through it and they're now telling me what I should do. How do you get over that? I'm assuming I'm not the only person who has ever felt this way.
Well, let me say this. You're going to get through it. As the therapist says, we don't get over it, we go through it. And I think number one is doing exactly what we're doing right here.
Right.
And to know that, like Elizabeth said, realizing you're so not alone and that we are all experiencing the same thing, including people who don't understand your experience, then telling you, well, this is now what you should do. Not having any clue what you've been through and that you're in survivorship. Like, I think it's almost a word we need to use more so that they understand there are no shoulds. You're still navigating this. Shay, you went through it, and every day is new. So how could someone who hasn't been through it tell you what to do? And that's frustrating. And it just depends on who it is, whether you can share that experience or not. Yeah.
One of the things that we had talked about when we were talking about this topic is trauma. And we're not going to have a Shay's Warriors retreat with cancer survivors and invite military veterans with PTSD. You guys there's PTSD. You having the exact same emotional, somatic responses, palpitations, flashbacks, feeling of isolation, what the heck is going on, but they aren't your tribe. So when you have a trauma, it is very hard to feel like you're connecting with somebody who's maybe experienced any kind of trauma, because we can relate to that sensation, but not the same experience to where you need your tribe, which is what Shay's Warriors is about, which is why we have, there's PTSD retreats for military, PTSD retreats for victims of child abuse trauma. Trauma, you have to have your tribe. And what you're saying makes a whole lot of sense as far as, like them like not getting it. But on the other hand of it, I don't have hypertension or high cholesterol, but I tell my patients what to do all the time who have hypertension and high cholesterol. If I was an oncologist, just because I haven't had cancer doesn't mean I can't empathize, so, and the people that might be telling you, they're probably doing the best that they can with the knowledge and the experience that they have to help you. And that's all different. I mean, it depends on, like you said, the context, who's telling you. Is it your oncologist, a therapist? You go to therapists who do divorce
tone.
counseling who haven't been divorced.
It could be in the tone and the way they present it.
Yeah.
Well,
I think too, there's a difference between having sympathy and being empathetic. Sympathetic and empathetic are very different. So maybe what I'm hearing is a lot of clinicians, we come off as very sympathetic. We're seeing things from our perspective, how we would experience what you're experiencing from where we are in our perspective. So it's almost like we feel kind of like it's a disconnection almost, right?
Yes.
Whenever you're feeling empathy, you're feeling connection with that person. You're trying to understand where they're coming from. It's no longer about you. So sometimes clinicians, we struggle with that, right? Because we just want to make you better and help you. We want to get, and so it's like, and we did that. And now we're, why can't you be celebrating this like we are? It's a triumph. And I mean, I never thought of that as being, I always thought of it as being like an encouraging thing to do. But at the same time, now that I'm hearing you, I'm learning from you. So I'm learning from all of you, like maybe to take that into consideration a lot more whenever I'm interacting with my patients.
Yes,
as a mental health professional, as a mental health professional who was exactly what you're talking about, then went through this insane experience, and now that I understand exactly the delineation between the two, and it's interesting because now that I work with survivors, it's a combination of you want to be present, empathic, not insert yourself upon them, but at the same time, from a clinician standpoint, also not confuse your stuff with somebody else so that they can have their own experience and feel understood. And I think that's one of the challenges in survivorship is feeling understood, feeling that, like I used to say, I've been blessed to not have any trauma in my life. Now, as a clinician, I understand what PTSD is. I treated it before. I helped people through it. But now it's a whole other piece of experiencing it, and it's a whole other level of understanding.
Thank you, Karen. Allie, I want you to go ahead because you are very unique in the fact that you have experienced both this and this is also your profession.
So thank you, Shay. Everyone's comments are fantastic, and I agree tremendously. I was hearing Shay's comments specifically more towards clinicians, meaning her medical doctors and her nurses, and being someone who also teaches empathy, active listening, communication skills to our residents. Most don't get that training. And I wonder, I so many different things bouncing in my head, but there's an old social work saying or clinical saying, therapeutic saying, anger masks sadness. So when someone right away is saying to me, I was really angry with them, like they don't understand, I'm thinking, are you really angry or are you sad? And either way, the point is for me, I get angry at people when they're not listening to me. Not that I didn't have my same experience. No one has your experience. You are unique. We're all unique. And we bring, again, with us all our uniqueness, how we interact. So no, for me, the anger comes up with, well, I just spent 8 minutes explaining how I feel, and they just went right past it. They just do not hear me. And unfortunately, that is a lot of medicine today. The clinicians are, I'm healing you, I'm taking care of you, I'm giving you all the right treatments and all, now I got to go see that next patient. That's not always their fault, but it doesn't matter. It's how you feel. So as a patient, a human being, but a patient, speak up for what you need and let your physicians know that. So if you need explanation, you tell your nurse practitioner, your PA, your physician, your nurse, whomever, what's the best time to make an appointment? Because I feel like you got one handle on the door walking out all the time. not pointing fingers. I get it. I realize you have 6 different exam rooms and 4 in the waiting room. So I'm not criticizing. I'm asking for some help because I need more time from you. And I want to do it together. Usually you will get a tremendous response when you frame it in that way. And the other thing is we're women. Women aren't allowed to be angry. We don't get it. Not okay. I wish I could memorize America Ferrera's speech in Barbie.
Yeah.
That's never. The truth is, it is okay to get angry. It really is. And whether it's masking sadness or not, it doesn't matter. But voice it. Say what you need.
Thank you.
Do you know?
I think that, I'm sorry, Jeannie, to cut you off there, because we do need to move on to the next question. But I think that what Allie, thank you for saying that, because you now gave me permission to feel the anger and to move on. And sometimes that's exactly what we need to hear as a cancer survivor.
Right.
We've spent a lot of time on that one, so I'm gonna move on to that next question that has come up, and I thank you. Again, we're not going to get through this in 60 minutes, but these are towards our survivors that are on this call. What has helped you the most going into and through your survivorship? Anissa or Elizabeth, Allie, any of you guys would you like to start this conversation?
Finding my tribe. If I had not found my tribe, I genuinely don't know where I would be. I was going through such a dark tunnel and such a dark hole. I was getting lost, and I don't know if I would honestly be here. It was getting that bad. So finding my people, my tribe, connecting and learning how to love myself again with all the changes that I was going through, and being able to validate some emotions that I was suppressing, that I didn't want to acknowledge to myself, but being able to speak on it and feel it and just own it, and giving myself grace to walk it. It's one day at a time. I do the best that I can to not look at tomorrow and try not to look at yesterday. I just try to focus on today, because that's all I have the energy for. I don't have the energy for tomorrow, and I don't have the energy for yesterday. So it's today, and I live in the moment, and I enjoy every single moment to its fullest, whether it's watching my son play baseball, going to coffee and connections, just giving myself permission to live life and be in my life, not being in it. It's just showing up for myself. That is so important to me, and I am so thankful that my family and my husband and my son allow me to miss baseball games so that I can show up to coffee and connections, because they know how important that is for me in my healing process and my journey, because it's a process, and I and I know that it's not gonna end tomorrow, but I'm okay with that, and I'm happy with that, and I feel that is going to take me in the right direction, and I will find that space where I'll be a better Elizabeth.
I think building off of what Elizabeth just said of staying in the present moment and staying mindful, that has really been instrumental for me in getting unstuck. Really, my way of doing so really is just through breathing techniques, because I notice whenever I'm feeling anxious or like just not right, I'm like, oh, yep, I'm holding my breath. And so breathing techniques were really, during treatment, I really kind of picked them up to help with some of the anxiety that was going on during that time. And since then, I've practiced a few different types of breathing techniques, but just being mindful in the moment and trying to observe my thoughts, not be too judgmental on them, and just letting things come as they come, feeling my emotions. And, they say that thoughts are the language of the brain and emotions are the language of the body, and really just trying to be present and mindful of both. I'm kind of an intellectual overthinker a lot, and so sometimes I over-intellectualize my feelings, and so that's why some more somatic therapies like breathing techniques, qigong, movement, and those kind of things really help ground me in my body. And I notice that when I'm not getting my movement in as much, I definitely have a lot more anxiety. And so, yeah, just staying present in my physical body has really, really been important for me.
Move to Heal has really helped me. I mean, most of you know on here that I do teach the Move to Heal classes, but going somewhere where there's also another community, I love a good spin class. Now, I'm way past my treatment, so I'm able to get back to it. And I was doing spin before I was going to or going through cancer, but the music and the spinning and just even sometimes a good soft jog, a walk, but music really helps me move through emotions, hard times, sad times. It really helps. And that really the physical part of getting back into things really helps me get so much anger, sadness, funk out of it.
I think the one word I haven't heard anyone use, which is very interesting to me, is fear. Because cancer, very rarely, if ever, does anyone go, diabetes, death, heart disease, death, osteoporosis, death. But we almost to a person go cancer, death. I challenge anyone to tell me truthfully they didn't go there when they heard they had cancer. Does this mean I'm going to die? So for me, that whole experience, one, reminded me of all kinds of fears throughout my life. Boogeyman in the closet as a little kid, fear of trying new things, fear of failure, fear of, well, I look like this, I don't look like that, whatever. And learning that actually life can be scary at times, and that's okay. And it is okay to be afraid, and cancer is very scary. So, it was a real eye opener for me to come to terms with that. It's probably, and I was 48 or 49. I'm lying. I was 52, 51. I'm trying to, but when I was diagnosed, I think the point is it was the first time that I felt vulnerable and realized that life is finite. We are not here forever. And people, myself included, don't like to have that discussion very often. So for me, it ended up being a bit of a permission to say, okay, so we're here for this certain amount of time. What am I doing with it? Where am I going with it? So interesting.
It's really interesting. Thank you. Thank you all for putting the input on that, because I'm sure this really relates to a lot of other people that are watching tonight. Going through, let's talk about something very important with PTSD. Is the reality of when it's survivorship, especially if you're in a doctor's office going for scans, waiting for results, etc. How do we manage severe PTSD, and what are typical and atypical signs of possible depression, and when do you need to really maybe help a friend, or when do you need to check yourself asking for you need to go to someone to really get the help that you need?
Well, as a mental health professional, I think that when you're not able to function in your life, that's when you want to take the next step to get another level of help, because there's all different levels of emotionality, what we're going through. And like what Allie said, what were our coping mechanisms before we got sick?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
and were they even good enough then? And now we have something massive to cope with. So sometimes you just need that extra help first to validate how you're feeling, then to help you learn. It's kind of like what Anissa was saying. Our brains can get so flooded by emotion we can't think rationally. So it's helping people also to integrate thinking and feeling, and so that their emotions and what's going on isn't interfering deeply in relationships, life, functioning, able to get out of bed. So if your level of functioning is not at a healthy place, that's a good time to say, what else can I do? Because what I'm trying to do on my own isn't enough or isn't working. And there are people out there who are ready with open arms to help. And I know going to therapy sometimes is like scary boogeyman. However, I would say if you decide to go to therapy, the key is it's not what are your credentials, how many years, what are your degrees. It's when I'm sitting with you, is my gut saying, wow, I'm comfortable and I can connect to you.
Yes.
So I think that that's a little bit of my take on that.
So what about like my situation? I was very high functioning. I was bubbly and smiley, and no one knew what I was feeling inside. No one knew that I was in total darkness.
Yeah.
I was so lost, but I hid it so well behind a smile. So how would my family be able to acknowledge that when I'm hiding it so well, and they think she's good, she's okay, she's fine? There's, I think a lot of them missed signs. There were signs that they didn't get, and they were there, but I was just so bubbly and happy and, kept going. That
Elizabeth, we always bubbly and happy. Is that who you always have been?
Always. I was the cheerleading coach, cheerleading happiness.
I see that in your smile. That's what's making me smile.
That's who I was, and still to this day. Now that I'm healing, I'm finding that I'm smiling genuinely, and it's not that smile that's hiding the pain. I'm genuine.
Elizabeth,
when you see me smile, it's genuine now.
Good for you. Good
Elizabeth,
for
did you ever bring your husband with you to any of your appointments?
I could not, because during COVID, and part of why I felt so isolated was because I sat in a chemo chair by myself. Yes, I had other patients, but some of them were very reserved. They didn't want to talk. Sometimes I was in a chemo chair in a room all by myself. I was so isolated, and it was so lonely, and there was no sharing the experience. Like, how do you share the experience? How he wasn't able to connect other than seeing, oh, she has a port, she got a port, that's it. That's the only part that he really saw. He didn't get to see anything. He got to experience a couple visits with surgical oncology, but not actually the other, going through actual chemo and radiation. He couldn't.
So, well, my question was because I tend to ask, a lot of patients, if you say, hey, are you depressed? They're not going to say yes. But when a spouse is with them, and hey, how you doing? And you're answering me all smiley, and I see the body language of your spouse, then I can draw, well, what do you think? Is she, picking more fights than normal? Are you guys going out on your date night? Like, we're medical, we're supposed to recognize those things, and we don't always, and not everybody's trained to do that or can empathize and recognize those things. So that's why I know I can't even imagine, first of all, what you went through, but then going through COVID. That is just a whole extra layer of, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
That you had to do that. I had COVID.
It's a whole nother level of trauma.
Yeah. I was in the ICU with COVID pneumonia, and by myself, and having been a former ICU nurse and used to like that being like the ultimate where you're taking care, and like my friends would come by the window that were nurses, like, hey, how you doing? It was very isolating. And I can't, but I can't even imagine like having that whole extra layer on there. So I am so sorry you had to go through that and feel that isolated. And I'm really hoping that through Shay's Warriors, you're coming out on the other side.
Yeah, and I think, Elizabeth, first, thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing
Mhm.
that with us. I really appreciate it. It takes a lot of strength and courage, and I think I kind of see that as a little bit of a failure of the community and the culture, like not feeling comfortable to even be able to share that with, anybody. And I think, I think we're both Latinas, and I know that it's prevalent within our culture of just kind of like, oh, you're good, everything's good. Like you
Yes.
don't really talk
Yes.
about it, and when you do,
Yes.
they're like, "Ay, cállate, niña," like
Yes.
be quiet, like
That's
don't
it.
really, yeah,
That's it.
exactly.
That's it.
And so I think it takes learning, and it takes being comfortable with yourself and and spaces like this to be able to learn to share those things. And so it's of no fault of your own, and it's unfortunate that we don't have better systems and structures that allow us to be able to learn how to talk about our feelings and those things, and have structures in place that gives us the support that we need, especially going through treatment. Like it's just unfortunate that there was no, hey, mental health check-in with you, because it's like the doctors should have at some point caught that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry
part
to
gets
hear that,
skipped.
because there are supposed to be. There are still oncology social workers if you're at hospitals, and professionals that are trained to be there for you, Elizabeth. But Anissa brings up a great point, which is the cultural aspect of things that occur in our lives, period.
Mhm.
And how it's important to recognize that they do drive a lot of our reactions to all kinds of things, including a cancer diagnosis. We were talking about how do you recognize the signs and symptoms, and I think it's hugely important to come back to that. There's a kind of a really simplistic rule of thumb that we can use, and that's really extremes. Are there real highs and real lows? Listen, if you have cancer and you weren't depressed at some point during your cancer treatment, there is something wrong with you. No one wants cancer. It's depressing. We get it. I was depressed. I don't know anyone who wasn't. Maybe not all the time. Maybe initially and it goes away. Maybe at the end. That's situational depression. Hey, that makes total sense. Good for you. Don't put on the happy face. That does make sense. But when it, and Karen mentioned this already, interferes with your everyday life, how do you know it's interfering? Are you sleeping all the time or not at all? Or having trouble sleeping? Are you napping? Well, you're done with chemo. Why are you napping in the middle of the day? It's been 2 years. That's kind of the rule of thumb. Maybe not eating right. Maybe not getting enough exercise. I don't know. Is everything wonderful all the time or never? So those highs and lows can really help. And then if you are fortunate in your life to have that one special person, usually a girlfriend, who you can say, hey, listen, let me know if I'm acting, you're seeing me, I'm just not being me. Give me a signal that I'm not being me. And then if those persist, those highs and those lows, that's when you need to ask, maybe I need some help here for a while. If I hope I'm not insulting the therapists in the room, and I am one as well, but I'm a great believer in Band-Aid therapy. You got an issue going on now, go in, talk to someone, get to the root of it, clean it up, smack a Band-Aid on it, and go about your life. You do not have a mental health diagnosis that needs serious medication, hospitalization. You've got something going on in your life that's just awful. Go get it fixed. And maybe you have to come back again at some point. Put a new Band-Aid on. Maybe it's a different scrape or a different sore. And that one has to be attended to. Therapy doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be, oh my God, I'm mentally ill. No, we're all everyday neurotics, every one of us.
Yeah.
Situational anxiety.
Allie, thank you for wrapping this up for us. I think that is the perfect place to end the conversation tonight, because, again, we could probably carry this conversation on for another few hours. I want to thank everyone for being a part of this panel tonight. I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers that are out there. The wound is where the light enters you. That's by Rumi. Be open and willing to accept all the possibilities that move you forward and just celebrate today. Celebrate that. For those of you, I'm Shay from Shay's Warriors, and please check out more, or if you want to replay this, you have questions, send us a DM or an email at shayswarriors.org. This will be up on our community page in the next day, so you can rewatch if you've missed anything, and we're happy to share resources and this community with you. From all of us at Shay's Warriors, thank you. And we do have a retreat coming up for those of you that are wondering. It's June 6th through the 9th. We are so excited to have Eisenhower's Lucy Kirch Cancer Center as our premier sponsor of this beautiful retreat. And nominations are open now. They close at the end of this month. So if you or someone needs a little bit more of TLC and needs to find a community, go to shayswarriors.org. Karen, Allison, Anissa, Elizabeth, Janine, and Amy, Dr. Fung, thank you so much for being on this journey with me. Good night.